Welcome back to the KitchenAid Cooking Theater. And with a name associated with some of Chicago's best kitchens, how can you stay out of the restaurant business? She started her culinary career in New York City, but returned to Chicago to open the critically acclaimed Lanie Brava, and most recently, Bar Soteneau. She is the spirits director for Frontera Restaurants. Please welcome Lanie Bayless.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with me today on this very cold Monday afternoon. I'd rather be in here than outside, I think that's for sure. So, welcome. As he said over there, I have the very lucky job of being the spirits director for Frontera, the Frontera group. So what that means is I get to deal with everything booze. It's very fun. So not only do I create the cocktails for all 6 of our restaurant locations, but I also work to curate all the lists of great agave spirits we have, as well as, of course, the other spirits that we use in our restaurants. So just a little bit about the different cocktail programs and things that we do in our different locations. At Frontera Grill in Topolobampo, you can go and get the best margarita in town, hands down, I guarantee. It's the same recipe that we've been making for almost 32 years since the restaurant opened. Shaken tableside, really delicious. But then we also are doing a little bit more to explore other fun tequila-based cocktails in that restaurant. If you do have the lucky opportunity to go to Topolobampo, we have just started doing an agave pairing with your menu. So just like you may go and have a glass of wine paired with your meal, we're now opening up the conversation to doing that with spirits, which is not something that's been done very much around before. So that's really exciting. Now, if you hop on over to our restaurants in the West Loop, Lanie Brava and Cruz Blanca, Lanie Brava has the largest selection of mezcal in the city of Chicago, and I'm so lucky to get to work with that list of over 165 different mezcals that we carry over there. And I'm lucky enough to get to learn about each and every one of them every day. Now, not only can you sip on some delicious mezcal, but you can also have, of course, some mezcal cocktails. Now, next door is our delicious brewery and taqueria, Cruz Blanca. Now, of course, beer is the shining star of that one. They make really delicious sort of modern styles of traditional Mexican beer style, or modern takes, excuse me, on traditional Mexican beer styles. But we've also got great fun cocktails there too, if you're perhaps not a beer drinker. And then last but not least, as he mentioned earlier, we just opened our newest restaurant, or newest bar, excuse me, which is called Bar Soteneau. It is a speakeasy bar underneath Frontera Grill's existing bar. You enter through the alley and come down and find a world of delicious mezcal cocktails, a highly curated mezcal list, and some modern Mexican bar food. It's really fun, and for the cocktails there, we really take you on a journey through a Mexican market. So each category on our menu takes you to a different stall, and you learn about fruits that are available, perhaps some chilies, botanicas, which is where you would get herbs, both medicinal, culinary, and otherwise. And then last but not least, you come to the fondas. The fondas in Mexico are where you get your prepared foods. So for those cocktails, we're really doing some fun collaborations with the kitchen where we're able to cross-utilize kitchen products and see how those delicious sauces or, in some instances, waste products that the kitchen would waste, we're able to turn them into a delicious cocktail. So that's a really fun thing, and I obviously hope to see you all down there. I'm there 5 nights a week, so come and say hi to me if you do come in. But another very large part of my job as spirits director is education. So not only do I work to educate our staff, so then again they can educate their guests that do come in, but also we work to educate the public, especially in the world of the agave spirits. Agave spirits are something that obviously people know of, especially I would think tequila. Everybody here has had tequila before, correct? Woo! Some people, yes, obviously, so that's definitely the most widely known. But then there's also the amazing world of mezcal, which is definitely coming sort of front and center in the spirits world right now in particular. So, as I said, I'm really lucky to teach all these classes. So I want to talk to you guys today a little bit about the differences and similarities about tequila and mezcal. Now, both of them obviously being an agave-based spirit means it comes from the agave plant. Now, that does grow in the ground, looks sort of like a cactus, and they take a very long time to grow. Sort of the minimum growing time is 6 years for one of these plants. and then again, it'll take you another 2 or 3 months to turn it into a spirit itself. Sometimes when we're talking about tequila, years of aging after that. So when you drink your tequila, even if it's just a Blanco tequila that has no aging, you've got at minimum like 6.5 years of work of somebody caring for a plant, tending the plant, making sure that it's got the water that it needs, that the soil is well taken care of. So there's a lot of love that goes into these spirits. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about tequilas. That's something it seems like most people know here. So in Tequila, there's actually a town called Tequila in the heart of the state of Jalisco in central Mexico. And the town of Tequila is centered in a really large valley that just has great soil for growing these agave plants. Now, in tequila, you use one plant to produce the spirit. That is the blue agave. Maybe you guys have heard of that blue agave. Sometimes it's also called agave tequileño, or tequila agave, since it's the only one that they use to produce that. Now that if you've harvested the plant, you do have to cook the heart of the agave to get the sugars to release to be able to turn into alcohol. So you do so by using sort of putting the agave hearts in a large steam oven. So it is cooked by indirect steam heat, giving a really nice, clean, and a little bit sweeter flavor to it. Then after that, you're going to start fermenting the agave juice that has been cooked and all the sugars have released. They do so by doing these in large stainless steel tanks that are closed off to the outside world, and they're adding the proprietary yeasts or bacteria that they have learned is what creates the fermentation process best for them. So after that, it does go into a very large still and get distilled. Now, the next part of the process being the aging. I think this is something a lot of people here, who here has ever had a reposado or an añejo tequila? Yeah? They've got a nice sort of smooth, sweeter flavor, maybe some vanilla, sort of caramely notes to them. Those notes are all coming from the barrel aging process. So, and as obviously too, the color will start to vary. So that's why you think of your reposados and añejos as being a brown color, similar to that of a bourbon or a whiskey. But your Blanco tequilas are obviously going to be a clear spirit, much like vodka or gin. One moment. Thank you. So that's tequila. So you can age it for the minimum of 2 months. And essentially, there's no maximum aging requirement. I've seen some ultra añejos that are aged for 12 years. So some of these go on, very, very long time. Personally, I like to stop my thinking at an extra añejo, which stops at 5 years of maximum aging time. That even still is quite a long time, but you're still able to taste a little bit of that original agave flavor, plus the barrel notes to it. When you get into the very old ultra añejo tequilas, you sadly lose some of that delicious flavor from the agave that took 6 years to grow to give it its flavor. So that's why I think, up to sort of 5 years is a great time, maximum aging time to think about. So a couple of different tequilas that I particularly really love right now, and then I'm going to use to make some cocktails for you folks a little bit later on. When we're thinking about a Blanco tequila, something that you guys can find pretty readily available that's very delicious at an affordable price point is going to be this one called Espolón. It's got a really beautiful painting on here that is taken from a very famous artist, Guadalupe Posada, who's a Mexican artist. So you've perhaps seen this iconography all around different parts of Mexico. But so they use this man's work as part of their label, but then they also produce a really nice, rich, creamy tequila that's got a decent amount of sweetness. So it's really delicious when you're making a margarita with it. Now, if we're going to go into the reposados or añejo aged tequilas, I like to think of them in 2 different camps. There's going to be some that you want to use for cocktails that are maybe, again, a little bit more approachable in price point when you have your friends over and you want a picture of margaritas. I would maybe look to something like a Milagro Reposado. It has not been aged for very long, about 6 months. Typically is their general aging time. So you get a nice amount of age on it, but not too much that it's going to overpower the flavors of your margarita. But if you were looking for something to sip on, maybe a little bit more delicate tequila to have after dinner or before dinner with your friends, this Fortaleza product is one that I really, really enjoy. Has anybody ever seen or tried this Fortaleza tequila before? It's a really delicious, this is actually made in the town of Tequila by a man that is part of a family that has been making one of the largest tequila producing families, and he's been making he's been making tequila since he was a little boy. And they do everything in a very sort of ancestral, artisanal way of making their tequila. Not maybe quite so much as these a little bit more industrialized, larger scale products like the Milagro or the Espolón. So these are just some delicious tequilas. If you see these on a menu or in the grocery store and you're ever wanting to have a little margarita party, maybe Cinco de Mayo is coming up and you want to invite your friends over, any of these would be a great products to have on your bar or at your house to whip up your margaritas for your friends. Now let's talk a little bit about mezcal. So mezcal by far is my favorite agave spirit. It is so complex, there's so much to learn, and there's so much to enjoy just within one bottle. The big thing that I want to sort of emphasize to everybody today is that mezcal is really a terroir spirit. Do you guys know the word terroir? So for some of you maybe do or don't, so terroir is sort of the flavors of the earth, the flavors of the place. So when I think about mezcal, to me, it is a snapshot of a time and a place. You can taste the soil, if it's grown in a drier soil versus a damper, more rich, nutrient-rich soil. And then you can taste the hand of the person that's making it, as well as maybe the environment that is around. So I think it's a really beautiful and unique spirit in that way. Now, so a couple of then similarities and differences to tequila, I would say. Now, we talked about Jalisco being the state in central Mexico where tequila is from. Now, Oaxaca, which is a coast in the southern, or a state on the southern coast of Mexico, is the heart of mezcal. It is a beautiful town. It is state, very rich in biodiversity, but it is also the home of sort of the art and food soul of Mexico, is what a lot of people say is in Oaxaca. So it's a great place to go if you're interested in food, culture, and then, of course, mezcal. So as we said, when you harvest your agaves in tequila making, you then put them into a big steam oven to cook them. But in mezcal, it's very different. They actually use a large underground earthen pit to cook the agave. So have you guys ever heard that mezcal has a smoky flavor to it? Or when you've tried mezcal, do you think that? So that comes from the underground earthen cooking of the actual heart of the plant. And now what they do is they light a fire, put some rocks on top of it and get those rocks really hot. And those rocks then they get covered with dirt, and that is itself what cooks the agave. And all of the smoke stays trapped in there with the agave plants, giving it that sort of earthy, smoky flavor to it. Definitely something I think I personally love and a lot of people in the world love, but it's something that if you're new to mezcal, it could take a little bit of trying to get used to that flavor. Now, another really big difference about tequila and mezcal is that in mezcal, you can use as many different varieties of agave as you can find. So there is no limit on one plant that you can use. And what that does is it really opens up a world of different flavors because each plant has its own flavor, a unique flavor profile to it. So that is just another way that mezcal has an added layer of complexity. Now, there is one agave that is sort of the workhorse agave for all of the mezcal in Oaxaca and other places, and that is the espadín plant. You can see the word written right on this black bottle. If anybody's interested, you can come up later and take a look at it as well. So that is relative to the blue agave that we use for making tequila, and it is the fastest and easiest to grow agave for making mezcal. So that's where you're going to see the majority of your mezcals have espadín in it. But then there is a large variety of wild and other agaves that you're able to use to create a really unique flavor for your spirit. Now, again, we talked about the cooking and all of that, giving it its smoky quality. But then after that, they actually leave for the fermentation process, they leave it open to the ambient air and anything that is just happening around there. So that's called a wild fermentation process. It's very similar to a sourdough, if anybody has ever made sourdough before, where you want the sort of natural yeast and everything in the air to really add the flavor to your starter there. So same goes for the mezcal concept, except for in a very large sort of fermentation vat. And then last but not least, it goes through its distillation process. There are many different styles of stills used in mezcal making, but I want to talk to you guys about one particular one, which is a clay pot still. So in certain villages in Oaxaca, they do use these large clay pots to distill the spirit, giving it a really mineral, sort of dry clay element to it. So that's a really beautiful, again, another added layer of complexity that mezcal can have that we sadly don't find quite as much in tequila. Now, the last thing I think is a major difference is going to be the aging. Now, we did talk about you can age tequila a very, very long time. But for mezcal, traditionally, it is drunk non-aged, untouched. The only thing perhaps they would do would be to rest it in a glass jar just to bring the flavors together and just make a sort of more cohesive product. But other than that, they typically drink them without any barrel aging notes. There are a couple of brands you've started to see in the United States that are aging their mezcal product. But why they're really doing that is for a correlation for the general public to tequila. So they want people to start enjoy tequila. They want them to enjoy mezcal as well. So they utilize that sort of parallel drawings of reposado and añejo to bring newcomers into the world of mezcal. Now, before I go on to talking about some different cocktails or anything, does anybody have any questions about the differences between tequila and mezcal? Yes, sir. Oh, I think he'll come over.
This isn't really about the differences between them, but what are your thoughts on certification for mezcal, the conversation that's happening between agave, blue agave, and
yes,
certified
I mean,
mezcal?
I think it's a very complex question. So the gentleman is asking about the certification process for mezcal making. Any mezcal that is imported to the U.S. is imported to the U.S. with the word mezcal on a bottle has to go through a very strong certification process that, there are many different sort of positives and negatives, I think, to the certification process. In my opinion, sometimes they're sort of putting too many constraints on a method of making something that's been happening for generations and generations. And I think you're seeing some of the maestro mezcaleros in Oaxaca turn against that because they want to keep making it the way that their ancestors have been making it. And they don't feel that they need to get the exact esters of alcohol tested and send their stuff to a lab because they know that they know how to make their product right. So I think it's a very interesting back and forth. But now I'm really happy to say that you can now buy something called a destilado de agave that's not a certified mezcal. They're starting to import those into the United States. And those are some of my favorite. There's a brand called Cinco Sentidos that is a destilado de agave brand that is my favorite brand probably out there on the market. So I think I'm really a fan of the uncertified stuff. I just think you get more nuances and more flavor. Cool. If anybody has any other questions, yeah.
Hi, I know it's great for drinking, but is it good for cooking as well? And
Mezcal?
what would you
Absolutely,
make with that?
absolutely. At Bar Sotano, one of my favorite things that we do right now is a lot of cross-utilization between kitchen and bar, and then bar and kitchen. So right now we use mezcal in a lot of stuff that we have on our menu. We use it to add some interesting flavors into two sauces that I can think of. We add it to whipped cream to do a mezcal whipped cream with our donuts. There's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do by adding. We have a ceviche that we pour a little bit of mezcal on the top of, again, just to add that extra flavor of complexity. But it's also fun. Myself and our chef are very close, and we love to work that closely together. We'll say, what does this dish need? And we'll throw a little bit of booze on it, and it will help it. And so definitely always looking to mezcal, adding that complexity, I would say. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and talk to you a little bit about making some different cocktails with these spirits that we've been talking so much about. So to me, I think that there are two major categories of margaritas. You can do a light, bright, refreshing, maybe great for summertime margarita, or you could do a little bit richer, rounder margarita, maybe a little on the sweeter side too, depending how you like those. So I'm going to give you some general guidelines of one of each, so you can and maybe you can mix and match if you want to find a perfect medium. So what I'm going to start with is the sort of light and refreshing one. And if you want something to be refreshing and light, I'm going to use a Blanco tequila, because we don't want any of that sweetness from the barrel coming into our refreshing margarita. I typically start with 1.5 ounces of my tequila. Ooh, my pour spout's not working. I start with 1.5 ounces of the tequila in there. And then I personally, for my light and refreshing margaritas, like to use the style of a triple sec, or an unaged orange liqueur, which is the other main component in these margaritas that we have to work with. So today I'm going to use Cointreau. Cointreau is probably one of the most famous sort of just straight triple sec varieties, very easy to find, and it's delicious. It's got bright orange flavors, which I really enjoy. So I do 1/2 ounce of that sweet orange sweetener in there. Now, since I couldn't get the tequila to pour the first time, I will finish adding the tequila that I missed. And then for this particular one, I like to make, when I'm doing a lighter, more refreshing one, I use a house-made simple syrup. So simple syrup is a very simple syrup to make by just doing equal parts sugar and water and boiling that down till the sugar dissolves. That's really all you have to do. So depending on, we use a raw cane sugar for all of the simple syrup at our restaurants, which is why it's a little bit darker in color. But if you use an unrefined sugar, it would just be a total clear consistency. So I use 1/2 ounce of the simple syrup for my refreshing margarita because I like it on the more tart side. So I'm going to do that. And then depending again on how much tartness you want, either 3/4 ounce to 1 ounce of lime juice. Again, since I say I like mine a little tartar, I'm going to do that full ounce of lime juice in there. Now, to shake it up. Smells delicious. Now, who here likes salt with their margaritas? Yes, I agree. I'm totally in that camp. Personally, I like salt in all my cocktails. I think just like food, a little pinch of salt goes a long way when you're working. So if you want to do a little salt rim at home, show you an easy way. It's my margarita glass here. If you just take a lime wedge and go all the way on the edge of that, and then I just have a plate with our salt here, and you can very easily dunk, and you've got a lovely salt rim. Go ahead and pour. Is it 5 o'clock yet? It's 5 o'clock somewhere, isn't it? There we go. So here we have our light and refreshing margarita. Again, thank you. Blanco, tequila, Cointreau, simple syrup, lime juice. Now, let's talk about that other kind, the more richer, rounder margarita. So in case you couldn't guess, I'm thinking about a reposado tequila. You've got all those barrel-aged, sweeter flavors already. So as we said, I'm going to use that Milagro reposado. I think this goes really well for mixing for margaritas. So 1.5 ounces, just like before, will go in there. Now, for this particular rounder, sweeter style, I am going to use a brandy-based orange liqueur. So one that's got sort of half that sweet orange and then cut with a little bit of brandy. Grand Marnier being the most famous one of those, come from France. Both of these, there's many other varieties that you can use. These are just sort of our standbys at our restaurants that we think really are always consistent and will always give you a great margarita. So as I said, again, I'm going to do 1/2 ounce of that one. And just because, again, I want it to be a little bit richer, I'm actually going to use an agave syrup in there. Agave syrup, just because there's not that water content in it, is a little bit of a richer thing, so you sort of feel it coat your mouth in a nice way. So again, depending on how sweet you want it, a half ounce to 3/4 of an ounce is what you would do. Since we're going to make this one on the sweeter side, I'm going to give it 3/4 of an ounce. Now, for sure, since we've got all those sweet components, though, we need our full ounce of lime juice to make the perfect balance. Now, since we've got one rimmed with salt, we're going to stick with this one just as an unsalted margarita for us today. It is a good arm workout, I know. Got to do it. So here we have our sort of sweeter, richer margarita. It's slightly darker in color, just mostly coming from the darkness of the Reposado tequila, and that this has got a little darker of a color as well. Always serve with a little wedge of lime in case your guests want to add a little bit more lime to their margarita. And voila, number 2. Now, I do want to talk about lime juice very briefly. Now, this is something we so believe in at our restaurants. Fresh squeezed lime juice is the way to go. To me, it makes or breaks your margarita experience. So I know it can be hard, I know it can be tricky, but it's definitely, to me, totally worth it if you're making a margarita at home to take the extra 10 minutes it is to juice some limes and use that fresh squeezed juice. So the next thing I want to do is do something a little bit different, which is a mezcal margarita. So obviously we talked a lot about mezcal and the differences between tequila and mezcal. 3 different mezcal products I particularly love, all for very different reasons. Has anybody seen these green bottles around behind in their bars or anything like this? This is Del Maguey. This is probably the most famous of the mezcal brands. They were the first brand to bring like artisanal mezcal into the United States. They've been importing it. They sell it 2 years ago. They celebrated their 25th anniversary. So they've been bringing mezcal into the United States for quite a while. But this is sort of, again, their cocktail, their most affordable in price point and really easy to enjoy mezcal. It's got a nice creaminess and it's a little lower on the smoke scale, I would say. This one over here, Monte Lobos, is a really fun one for people that love that smoke quality. Do I have any Scotch lovers in the audience? Yeah, so this, when I have guests that say that they like Scotch, this is the mezcal that I recommend to them a lot of times. It has a peaty quality to it, which just comes from the wood that they use for their fermentation. So I think it's a really great sort of similar, it's got a lot of really nice similarities to Scotch. But again, this one I would keep for sipping on, or maybe if you really want that smoky flavor, you could use that in a cocktail to have that smoke come through. Last but not least, this brand, Oaxaca. I will tell you this is not how the state spells its name. This is a phonetic spelling of the word. Is a really great sort of light in smoke, clean and dry mezcal that we're going to use in a fun cocktail called a paloma that we will be doing later on. So I think for the mezcal margarita I'm going to do today, though, I'm going to use this Vida mezcal. Again, really well balanced, not super smoky, got some nice creaminess to it. So 1.5 ounces of the mezcal. And then for this one, instead of the orange liqueur, I'm going to play around a little bit, and I'm going to use something called Ancho Reyes. This is a delicious dried red chili liqueur that comes from the state of Puebla in Mexico. So it's got a really nice, it's got a little bit of spice to it, but mostly you taste a lot of that yummy, toasty chili flavor. And I think it goes perfectly within a mezcal margarita like this, because you get a little bit of that spice in there. So just taking the place of the Cointreau, I'm going to use a 1/2 ounce here of this Ancho Reyes. Personally, I'm going to go back to simple syrup for this one because I don't want quite as much sweetness, and I want that mezcal and chili to really stand out. And again, I'm actually, because of that, excuse me, I'm only going to use 3/4 of the ounce of lime juice on it. Okay, I got one more arm workout in me, so I think I can do it. For this one, instead of doing salt on it, I'm actually going to do a sprinkle of something really special that comes from Oaxaca. That is something called sal de gusano. Does anybody know what the word gusano means? Worm, correct. So this particular salt has something that has in it is some chili, and then a little tiny bit of ground up agave worm. So there is a worm that is very common to find in the agave plant itself. In Mexico, they love to eat insects. They eat lots of different kinds of insects. Grasshoppers, crickets, or chapulines in Oaxaca are one of the most popular just snacks to pop in your mouth, like we would do peanuts or chips. So they love that flavor of a little bit of that earthy flavor of the insect. So they toast those agave worms that are, again, a naturally occurring thing that happens within the plant, combine it with a little bit of chili and salt. So I'm just going to do a little sprinkle of that on top to help the chili flavor pop out, as well as the earthiness of the mezcal. So there we have 3 pretty different margaritas. I think you could probably find one for each of your friends or guests or anybody that you may want to have over. But I did want to leave you with one other really special recipe to my particular heart, which is a paloma. Has anybody here ever had a paloma before? Yes. Palomas are a delicious grapefruit cocktail. Now, in Mexico, they're served a little bit differently than we think of them here in the United States. In Mexico, it's typically tequila or mezcal, depending on the region you're in, and then some lime juice and squirt, which is that Mexican grapefruit soda on top. I would say in the United States, we do tend to want to add a little bit more grapefruit juice to it, and I'm a proponent of that for sure. So let's make a fun paloma. Should we use mezcal or tequila? Mezcal. Woo, that was like a pretty unanimous decision there. So this one I'm actually just going to mix right in the glass. It's a little easier than that. You don't really need to shake it and give it all of the coldness, since we'll put the ice in the glass directly. So I'm going to start with 1.5 ounces of grapefruit juice. As you can tell, we are looking to go into a little bit bigger of a glass, so you need to have more volume in your cocktail. So that's why I'm going to do 1.5 ounces of this grapefruit juice. A little bit of lime juice will definitely help pop the acid to that. So 1/2 ounce of lime juice will go in next. And then I'm going to put probably just about 1/4 ounce of simple syrup in there. You really don't want to get too much syrup because we are going to top it with squirt at the end. So it does have a lot of sweetness in it already. So you don't really need to add a lot of extra sweetness. Thank you. And then, of course, we're going to add the mezcal. Now, I think that the Oaxaca mezcal that we have over here is going to be the best bet for us because, as I said, it's pretty low in its smoke profile and clean, got some nice sort of brighter flavors to it. And since we're not adding any other spirits to this one, why not? I'm just going to put 2 ounces of the mezcal in there, right? Never hurt anybody. 2 ounces of that mezcal will go in there. Then put some ice in there, but don't forget to leave a little bit of space for your squirt, because we do need to top that at the very end. So, Mexican squirt, definitely the best. And then you just need to give it a little stir up. All the flavors should incorporate beautifully that way. And it's got a nice little bubble to it. So there we have our Mezcal Paloma. Something you could always do with this if you wanted to make any sort of flavored, or you could always buy too, a flavored simple syrup. I love basil Mezcal Palomas are really delicious. You could do a chili in there too if you've got friends that like spicy stuff. Like a jalapeno Paloma is really delicious. We actually have a sort of play on a jalapeno Paloma on our menu at Bar Sotano that's very popular and very delicious. So that's sort of what I've got for you folks this afternoon. Are there any more questions that I could answer for you?
What did you say your favorite sugar is to use in your simple syrups?
So we use like sort of raw sugar, just, yeah, any sort of raw unrefined sugar. Wholesome Sweeteners is, I think, our typical go-to brand, but anything, just anything. Typically, as long as it's unrefined, it'll just be a little bit richer in flavor.
Squeezer at the restaurant?
Oh, we have a mechanical one that goes all day long, let me tell you. I've never seen quite so much lime juice in my life, but we use it all. And again, like we said, every day fresh squeezed, so that's one of the main keys. Actually, any sort of juices at our restaurants, we do everything the fresh squeezed way as much as we can. Any other questions, folks? Okay, well, thank you so much for spending your Monday afternoon happy hour with me. Please feel free to come up, take any pictures of any bottles you'd like, or ask any questions. I'm happy to hang out. Thank you very much, folks.
Another round of applause. Lanie Bayless, everyone.
Thank you.
Now, are you working tonight?
What?
Are you working tonight?
We're actually closed on Sundays and Mondays,
Okay.
so I'll be there tomorrow, though.
Perfect. Bar Sotano, the latest and greatest from the Frontera group.
Yeah.
There's too many.
Yes, absolutely.
Topolo Bampo, Shoko, Frontera Grill. It's great. Again, ladies and gentlemen, stick around. We still have some more demos. Thanks for coming by. We'll see you next year.